Here we are again on our Tuesday night, the 19th of May. Welcome to our My Self Reliance Community Connections chat. It's so good to have you all here. I'm Kelli Wilkins, your host, and well, we have such a great night lined up for you tonight. Before we get going and I introduce to you our guest speakers tonight, let me tell you what's coming up in My Self Reliance. So, this Saturday, if you are in the Sydney region, anywhere around Sydney, you want to get along to the meat canning at in the hills in Rouse Hill. You do need to register. So go onto the website and register yourself for the meat canning. You just have to bring your own meat and you get to participate in that beautiful community event. Everyone will can together. Take jars with you. There's a whole list of things you need to bring. So make sure you register for that and get along. Okay. The same day, there is the Blue Mountains coffee catch up. So that'll be fun to get together if you're in the Blue Mountains area. The week after, we have the Tiny Homes Expo. And so My Self Reliance have our own pavilion at the Tiny Homes. We've got speakers across the day. We've got 15 plus stalls, vendors there. You can get along and see some really great My Self Reliance in action, and also a masseuse and entertainment. Plus, on the Friday night, Isaac, who is our guest speaker tonight, will also be doing a combat medic beyond first aid training. So that'll happen between 5 and 8 p.m. And of course, we will hang around afterwards and socialize. So you want to get along to that. You can also attend so that's the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So get your tickets at the Tiny Homes Expo website and use the code MSR Tiny, all in capitals, and get 20% off your discount off. Go check the website for all of our other events. We have got so much going on. But right now, I want to introduce you to our guest speakers tonight. There you are. Welcome. I came across Isaac and his beautiful wife, Alexa, who's also on tonight. They're with the Natural ArtForm, with their beautiful skincare. And he's going to dive into all of that tonight with so much knowledge in first aid, in the military, with his natural herbs and botanical range of products. You're going to get so much out of this evening. And I'm so excited because I didn't really know what DMSO was before this. So, Isaac, welcome.
Thank you.
So good to have you. Now I'm going to turn the time over to you and let you present tonight.
All right, very good. And if you could see Alexa down there, she's got the little green orb floating behind her. So she can wave, say hi. Okay. So later on, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to be doing a presentation on DMSO and long-term health. But at the end of that, we're going to do a little drawing. And we've got some, one of our new products, or our newest product, ALLEVIATE PRO. And Alexa will, do you want me to hold it up? So this one, we'll be giving this away, and we'll tell you about it at the end. Before I get into the presentation, so my background, I was a trauma medic in the Army. Briefly, I was trained at the Special Operations Combat Medicine School in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, as part of, I was in the special operations side of all that. And as part of my training, I also received survival training, like wilderness survival. And I really paid attention to the herbalist side of that, and had always had an interest in using plants and things for whatever uses. Maybe that was, I have a Navajo lineage, maybe it was something like that, or just growing up in the country. But anyways, I went through the medic training and kept up with just my passion and interest with natural remedies. And I'm glad I did, because years later, I would injure my shoulder and have this rotator cuff injury keep repeating, and eventually kicked the pharmaceutical stuff off to the side and started looking at natural anti-inflammatories, of which DMSO is a very powerful one. And I will go ahead and there we go. All right. Now you can see that. DMSO, long-term health. Y'all can see that, right?
Yep.
Alexa can see it. Can you let me know, has anyone never heard of DMSO? Okay, some heads shaking. Okay. And if anyone has DMSO on their shelf, I can't really see your raised hands, but can you give us a thumbs up if you already have DMSO at home on your shelf somehow and you've been using it?
Yeah, we got a couple of thumbs up.
Okay. So we got a mixed bag of folks that have used it and some that haven't. So for the purposes of this talk, this is going to be an information purpose only, but there will be some useful knowledge and it's up to the individual's responsibility. This is My Self Reliance after all. So my job is to just present the information with the good and the bad, potentially, the risks and the possible benefits. And we're going to start with a brief history of this. I'm not a doctor. I don't play a doctor on the internet. I do have a lot of medical training, a lot of experience, and I have no certifications to to stand up to or to be stripped away from me, which I think makes me dangerous enough to be helpful. So DMSO began with the discovery back in the 1800s by a man named Alexander Zaitsev in Russia. I'm not going to get too much into this, but essentially it was a portion of the wood pulp when they were making paper, and they used it as a solvent for like 100 years until the 1960s. It's a very efficient solvent. In fact, I've experimented a little bit with doing some extractions with it with different plants, and it's incredibly efficient at that. So from 1866 until the 1960s, like I said, it was basically just a lab solvent for 100 years. And from the time period from the 50s up to the 60s, it kind of became this like rave, like everyone's raving about it. They were interested in using it because of its pain relief properties. Basically, somebody had gotten it on their skin and they could taste something in their mouth very quickly after it was on the skin. So it started with a little bit of curiosity about that. I believe the story goes one of the men that got it on his skin had either stiffness or arthritis in his hands, and he noticed there's like a pain relieving or analgesic effect. I'll try to stay away from a lot of the medical terms and stuff like that. So after the 60s and kind of the heyday of people using it for anything and everything, the FDA did a crackdown on it, which, anything in the pharmaceutical industry, if there's something that's cheap that can't really be patented because it's a natural derivative, it tends to be pushed aside or suppressed, as many of you might be aware has happened in the past, because it competes. One of the interesting things about DMSO, I mentioned somebody got it on their skin and they could feel the pain relief effects of it. They started using it to also combine with, initially they were even combining it with pharmaceutical drugs, where they would actually use like a tenth of the amount or like a very minuscule amount and then put it topically on. And then the DMSO would help the absorption of a small amount of the pharmaceuticals, which for the pharmaceutical industry, multi-trillion-dollar industry, is not good news, because that means that you don't need to use, the full dose of whatever they're administering all the time. So 1965, and then, about a decade later, there was a limited approval and things started lifting. It was shown that there really, as long as you're not mixing DMSO with anything poisonous, there weren't really any glaring risks or glaring reactions unless you're sensitive or allergic to sulfur of any kind, which I should probably just drop in here. For those that aren't familiar with DMSO, DMSO stands for dimethyl sulfoxide. It is an organic sulfur compound. It's in pine trees. It's in a lot of different trees, but pine trees, because they survive the cold, DMSO has a very powerful effect on stabilizing and protecting cells from frost damage. It's also in garlic. I believe that's part of why garlic has a bit of that garlicky smell, is the sulfur component of the plant, and DMSO is a sulfur compound. So it continued to be manufactured and made available, and today You can buy DMSO on Amazon. You can buy it at many naturopathic stores, or like Mullum Herbals here locally sell it, and other places. What I would just say is, if you're going to buy it, this brand here at the beginning, Allantoin, is one of the best brands that I have found. Everything is packaged in glass and it's shipped very securely. They come from Slovenia, and they package it so well you could probably drop it out of an aircraft and it would survive the fall, which I appreciate. I appreciate that. Good. Cool. So that is the brand. And what's interesting about this brand, you can't really see it, but on the side, there's a little reddish, like half circle. This one is actually some form of energetically structured DMSO that they sell. And I'm not sponsored by Allantoin. I don't get any money for this, so I use them for my products, and they're really good. But they sell some other holistic remedies, including zeolite and I'm sure activated charcoal. There's a really good DMSO aloe vera blend that I'm currently using just topically. Okay, let's go back up to where we're at here. All right, so DMSO, what happens when you put DMSO on the body? First of all, you should never just put 100% DMSO on your body. I've put a little bit on my skin. It has a warming effect. If you were to douse your whole arm in it, you could get like a chemical burn. It would probably be short-lived, but it's not recommended to put 100% pure DMSO on your arm. So most of the formulations, the strongest dose that they'll recommend is like 70%, which might have a slight tingling sensation when it goes on your skin. It's a liquid. At room temperature, when it's cooler, I'm from America, so I don't know what the Celsius is for us, but it's like 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is probably close to 15 or 18 degrees Celsius. DMSO will be frozen solid. It'll be crystalline in the bottle. And it's safe to freeze it in the glass bottle because the DMSO doesn't expand and break the glass. It is something that they actually use in cryogenics. When they freeze cell tissues, they actually saturate it in DMSO, pop it in the freezer, and I'm sure they have very sophisticated freezers. And then once that tissue is frozen, the cells don't rupture, like the water in it doesn't break the cell membrane. And when they thaw it out, there's no tissue damage. So you can take like sperm cells, for instance, for artificial insemination or whatever, and freeze them in DMSO, thaw them out, and they're still wiggling around and ready to do their thing. In the body, your DMSO gets into the bloodstream very quickly. It'll absorb into almost every tissue in the body within 30 minutes if you were to dilute it in water and, let's say, drink it, or they've done intravenous applications with it where they dilute it in saline and then put it directly into the veins. And in about 30 minutes, they can take a tissue sample almost anywhere on the body and find trace amounts of the DMSO in it. So it has a very rapid diffusion in the body. It spreads through the body very quickly, safely. The way it goes through the skin is by rearranging the lipid layer. So the fatty layer that is why your skin has this like a little bit of oily consistency to it. It basically temporarily restructures that so that things can penetrate through. And then that fat layer, that lipid layer returns to normal. I can't really find any specific details on how long it lasts as far as when you put the DMSO on and how it absorbs before the cells are no longer what they say hyperpermeable or more easily absorbing through. And that's where the caution comes in of making sure that anything that's on your skin that's a contaminant is washed off with non-toxic soap, something without artificial colorings or fragrances or chemicals, before putting the DMSO directly on the skin. And anything that's mixed with the DMSO has an amazing ability to help draw that quickly through the skin and into the bloodstream and even into the tissues. Like if you were to put it on your hands, it would absorb through the skin and potentially into like the ligaments in your hands, the bone even, because it's just, it's very a small molecule. In fact, it will even pass the blood-brain barrier and can potentially carry things that it's mixed with through the blood-brain barrier as well. Typically, like if you rub DMSO on your head and you have dirt on your head, it's not going to take the dirt into your blood-brain barrier. It's not that powerful, but they still recommend using it on clean skin. If you were to put it intravenously, that's probably the fastest way to get it. Instead of getting absorbed into tissues, it's right in the blood vessels, and that's where it tends to go the fastest through the blood-brain barrier. As your body processes the DMSO, and remember, DMSO stands for dimethyl sulfoxide. Your body breaks that down through your liver into MSM, or methyl sulfonyl methane. MSM is a common joint supplement, or some people even take the MSM for like skincare and just overall health. So it breaks down the DMSO into MSM and then DMS. And the DMS, or dimethyl sulfone, is what gives sometimes the like a garlicky smell or sulfury smell on your breath or urine, and that taste in your mouth as well. If you've ever used a DMSO mixture that you can taste it or feel it. And all that is done safely. In all my research on this, I haven't come across anything saying that there's like a lethal dose of this. I think people are wise to be very cautious with the amounts of DMSO they use, especially the pure stuff. But the body very quickly does its processing of this. And the MSM is really beneficial for all kinds of things in the body. And it has the sulfur component in it and a methyl group. And both of those are broken down and used in dozens, if not hundreds, of processes throughout the body. So that MSM will actually stay in your bloodstream for several days after the DMSO has been metabolized, and then be used as needed throughout the body. And then the rest of it just gets excreted safely through the urine and even your breath, which is why you get that kind of fishy or sulfury smell. All right.
So someone just asked if about drawing things out of the body, and the example is with an ingrown toenail removed, but she feels like there's stuff still left inside. Would DMSO be beneficial to draw out?
Yeah, there's a lot of data on using DMSO as a detoxifier, primarily for small things. Like it's a very efficient free radical scavenger. So when you have reactive oxygen species or oxygen species in the body, DMSO binds with those and gets them out of your system very quickly and efficiently. Sometimes it will, because it stimulates circulation and microcirculation, and will do that as well, not just the blood vessels and the capillaries and all of that, but also the lymphatic vessels. And for instance, I've had probably potentially due to the vaccines in the Army, I've had some fatty lymphatic, these fatty bumps, the lymphatic tissue that has these little nodules around the body. Sometimes they get a little bit bigger. And I've been putting that on some of them, and one of them reacted and kind of turned red and got itchy, and then pushed stuff through the skin. And that's part of the detox pathways that the DMSO can activate. Now, as far as like foreign objects or like little bits of like grain or dirt or like an embedded something, I haven't seen any evidence that it pushes out like large physical things. I know that there is caution that people have mentioned about implants. If you have artificial knee or artificial hip or things like that, that the DMSO would break it down, because it's, it still acts as a solvent when it's used in its full strength. But you'd have to really use a lot of like the full strength DMSO repeatedly over an area to do any kind of dissolving of that kind of stuff. And typically the things that they put in the body, if it's titanium or something like that, DMSO is not going to affect that. But yeah, so if there's like an ingrown toenail, like you mentioned in the question, and there's like a piece or something in the skin that needs to come out, the DMSO would probably have more of like an anti-inflammatory effect. And if there was any, as part of the inflammation, when you have inflammation, the damaged cells will break off little free radicals and it'll bind with those and get those out of the system very easily. Yeah, but you might think, combining it with something else that also activates your body's expelling mechanisms. So let's see. So the bioavailability, and let me just see. I'm trying to see if I can move. I have this thing in my screen and I'm trying to move it. Okay, here we go. All right, I'm not going to read all of these things. If you want, go ahead and screenshot these slides. So this is talking more about the MSM. So the purpose of this talk is to go over the more long-term benefits of DMSO. One of the primary long-term benefits that I see with DMSO is when the body breaks it down into the MSM, or the methylsulfonyl-methane. And I'm just saying that again because I like to practice that, because up until now I haven't really ever said that word properly. So MSM, oral supplements are the most popular. If they're using MSM as a supplement for, let's say, joint rehabilitation, things like that, they use a ton of it. They use like up to 5 grams of it in your dose, and you're not going to get that much from the DMSO. But if you're using it daily, like for instance, I have in our ALLEVIATE PRO, there's about 10% DMSO in there. And if you're using that daily as like either it's muscle recovery or for joint health or inflammation or something like that, the MSM doesn't get all used up in that same day. It'll last for a few days potentially in the system. So there would potentially be a cumulative effect of how much would add up over time. So it could add up to that, like it says down here, 4 grams a day for extended periods of MSM use has an excellent human safety record. So as far as that in the system, it would take a lot of DMSO use to add up to the 4 grams per day, because when your body metabolizes DMSO, only about 15% of the DMSO is turned into MSM. Yeah, so the blood-brain barrier, that's a potentially really, really effective or really useful thing, considering the nature of DMSO and its anti-inflammatory as well as detoxifying abilities. I haven't seen any studies about it being used in chelating or taking out heavy metals. So that is something that would be interesting to dive more into. But because it passes the blood-brain barrier and it has such an affinity for taking out these inflammatory things or lowering what they call inflammatory markers, would potentially have good effects, long-term benefits for anyone with like neurodegenerative disorders. In fact, there's some research that they point to that shows DMSO as being neuroprotective. Let's see, systemic reach. I'm going to go ahead and skip that. We're not going to get into like the chemistry of the organic sulfur, but just know that sulfur is used for one of your body's most potent antioxidant, which is glutathione. So your body makes this itself, and I believe it's made in the liver, or at least in the gallbladder. And MSM or DMSO has the sulfur component that the body uses to make glutathione. So especially if someone is doing a lot of coffee enemas, green coffee enemas will cause your body to dump about 700% higher levels of glutathione into the body, which it will then need to rebuild. So if you were doing a lot of green coffee enemas, for instance, taking MSM or DMSO or something else with that sulfur, eating a lot more eggs, something to replenish your body's sulfur so it can make more of that antioxidant is a good idea. All right. Let's see. So another primary major use of DMSO is as a delivery vehicle. And this is where I first started using it for my shoulder injury. And it was to take things like arnica or comfrey or calendula or other anti-inflammatory oils, combine it with the DMSO. I even use magnesium and mix it with the DMSO and rub it topically, and it helps draw those into the tissues a lot better, which gives each of those natural components a longer effect. because of its availability to the tissues rather than just getting on the skin, absorbing in and being carried just by the bloodstream. It seems to last longer in the tissues directly under where it was applied. So that's the transdermal side. Neurological access, we kind of already covered that. One thing that I am very interested in, if you're on, I believe Telegram, Midwest Doctor has a channel that's very good. He's very focused on DMSO, puts out a lot of really good information. I don't have a link to them, but you can probably find them pretty easily. I'm pretty sure it's called a Midwest Doctor.
I think it's Midwestern Doctor, and I've seen most of the articles on Substack is, I think, the best place to find that information. I'll pop the link in the chat.
Yeah. So one of the things that I learned about DMSO through that article about treating stroke and even aneurysms was they were showing evidence that DMSO was both preventing the spread of damage after a stroke, and I believe this was through intravenous use. And I will say again, like DMSO goes into the bloodstream very quickly when it's used topically. So logically, there would potentially be similar effects if you just put DMSO topically, like eardrops or, orally or, on the scalp, probably through, one of the softer tissues. Amanda Vollmer in Canada does make eye drops with DMSO. And in my experience, I've bought some, and she makes one with vitamin C, and just be forewarned, it's effective. It has plenty of DMSO in it, but it does kind of burn the eyes a little bit. But that would potentially be a way to do something similar in a pinch, in an emergency. Or what I like to think is like this long-term health vision that I have about this is using DMSO as with the intention of a preventative of stroke damage or neurodegeneration. And one of the reasons for that is because of that sulfur compound and the methyl, primarily the sulfur, it's used in creating the collagen matrix. People take collagen, it's in bone broth, that kind of gives bone broth that jiggly makeup. So collagen is used to make the linings and the tissues of your blood vessels, large and small. And so you have these small blood vessels throughout the brain, and even like the dendrites, like the neurons, potentially would benefit from that. But DMSO and MSM have been shown to, we'll say, reinforce that structure. So they've used it with a potential aneurysm, a blood vessel in the brain that was about to burst, and they were treating the person with DMSO, and they showed basically like the blood vessel seemed to have a bit of like a funny shape to it because it was weak, and the pressure on it was kind of causing it to bunch up and bulge a little bit. And after several weeks of this DMSO treatment with it and careful monitoring, they noticed that the blood vessel had kind of straightened out a bit and the bulge had reduced, indicating that there was some reinforcing going on in that blood vessel. So it's pretty amazing stuff. And it's, again, all this needs even further investigation and research. But all of this stuff is pretty well documented and is very promising at this stage. Let's see. It's pretty common. A lot of things we are deficient on in our diet. Magnesium is one of them that I pay attention to quite a bit. And then sulfur is also something that is commonly deficient in the Western diet, especially due to over farming. I think we probably have more of a problem with that in America. Yeah, so typically somebody with sulfur depletion or somebody that has very low amounts of sulfur in their system would feel more like probably more quickly the effects of MSM or DMSO use, basically just replenishing that vital nutrient, and then the collective effects of the tissues and the organs and everything else just operating better because of more readily available resources to do their normal jobs and to create, like sulfur is used to create hormones, it's used to create, neuroregulators and all these other things. Yeah. And I will say this too, there's a caveat because I mentioned about not being like a toxic limit that I've found. more is not always better with DMSO. And I'll get to that at the end. There's some not overly concerning, but there are some things to be aware of when thinking about using DMSO. And obviously, I always recommend to anyone interested in learning a lot more about DMSO and maybe some simple, really safe ways to make your own home remedies is Amanda Vollmer's book, Healing with DMSO. That one is excellent. That's where I first started, like really kind of tinkering with the formulas. Yeah, good stuff. Okay, I already went over the DMSO and the stroke studies. You can look that one up if you want. You can screenshot this. There's the name, De La Torre, 1975. And there were other studies that also replicated the same benefit or the same effects, which is really important because I figured there was a book written like a few years ago or a decade ago or whatever, but it was basically talking about how there is a crisis in being able to replicate scientific studies, where there's all these scientific studies going out and nobody can reproduce those same results, which calls into question the validity of any of those studies. So it's good to see if something was done once, if someone else can do it again. So that's really important to pay attention to. Not every study is reliable, no matter how professional it looks and no matter how big the university was that paid for it. So another really interesting thing that I found was this study early on in the 1970s from, I think it's Elizabeth Friend is her name. No, Charlotte Friend. There it is right in front of me. 1971, Charlotte Friend. She is a cancer researcher, microbiologist or some other specialty, but she was researching leukemia cells and was taking DMSO, putting it in a petri dish with these leukemia cells. And so basically with some of these erythroleukemia cells, they're kind of like blood cells that, like a blood cell with Down syndrome. Like it's got the basic shape, it's a bit misshapen or whatever, and it's kind of doing its function, but it's not able to carry, some of them are not even able to carry hemoglobin, which is what carries oxygen in your cells, which is obviously vital for life. And the DMSO basically was kind of like rebooting these cells and then causing them to, or allegedly causing them to turn into like proper cells, whether it's a red cell carrying hemoglobin or a white blood cell or whatever. So that study was, I believe, was like fairly extensive and was, like they say, it was a landmark discovery, a very new thing that they call differentiation therapy. So for leukemia, DMSO was doing some very interesting things, which I think crosses circles into pleomorphism and how these cells can morph back and forth into different types of cells for different purposes, depending on what's going on in the body. That one, I don't have as much of like a practical use for that, but it's good to know that DMSO does have some kind of like, some kind of ability to signal to the cell and kind of like maybe wipe the memory and reboot it or something. So overall, I'd say that's a pretty good effect. Let's see. Okay, so there's some really like sciencey words. If you're interested in reading all those and looking up anything, it's great information to learn from. I'll try to simplify as much of this as possible. This gets into more of like the detox effects and reported symptoms. So, and what I would say about this is tying it back to the long-term health of the body with DMSO, the detox part is really key. So for those that are like me, like I didn't cotton on to, vaccines and vaccine damage and all that stuff until after I got out of the military. And when I was in the Army in boot camp, I had a whole, handful of IV, or not IV, but, intramuscular injections with supposedly, hopefully, just some vaccines. And then immediately afterwards, became allergic to fish and certain types of beer and just weird stuff. And That on top of the years that I spent in the oil field prompted me to really look at doing detoxification. I never had a serious crash to my health. I did have these lymphatic bumps start to show up, these fatty tissue bumps that have, just questioning like what's going on there. But detoxifying is something that, especially in this modern age where, potentially stuff coming down from the clouds and stuff that's being sprayed overhead, or even just, living in a city with exhaust fumes from cars and brake dust containing, all kinds of small particles of aluminum and lead and other things. It's good to think about detoxification and to look into different ways for that to work. So, like I said before, DMSO is more of like a free radical scavenger. That's kind of its big, potent detoxification. In fact, if anyone has ever heard of something called crush syndrome, there's a fancy word for it, which escapes me at the moment, but crush syndrome is like if something falls on you and you're trapped under it, like your arm is trapped for a long time and it cuts off circulation to your hand and your arm. If someone were to take that, let's say it was a tractor that fell on you or something, if someone were to take that tractor and lift it off you after like an hour or so, it could potentially kill you when it releases all that trapped, dying blood cells and everything else in that arm, as it basically pumps all those dying cells through the rest of your body, including what those cells give off as they're dying, which are like little chemical things and anti-inflammatory free radicals, or reactive oxygen species, they call it. And basically a reactive oxygen species is when a cell's damaged, it can kick out this little particle that sticks to other cells and damages them pretty quickly. And I call that, like when it starts to cause a chain reaction, I call that like a free radical cascade. So as these reactive oxygen species go through and they kind of chain react, that can trigger, it can kill someone. It can kill you, cause organ damage, especially interrupting kidney or liver function and the heart. And they've done some pretty invasive tests with animals that I won't describe in full detail because it's kind of gross, but they do animal studies where they induce heart attacks and coat the heart in DMSO. And so they basically kind of kill the heart and then bring it back. And the DMSO basically stops that. What's similar to the crush syndrome is that collective death of the cells, kicking out these free radicals that then cause a chain reaction. The DMSO basically like bonds and starts picking up all these free radicals and then kind of encapsulates them and moves them out through like the urine and wherever else, sweat or whatever the exiting pathways are, without causing the same level of damage as if, you would just release that into the system and it killed you. So that's potentially important if you're, if you're in a situation where you don't have a hospital nearby or the ability to travel very quickly to a hospital, and there was a crush situation. As a medic in the Army, it was pretty simple. They just taught us to put a tourniquet on that limb, pull it off, pull the machine off, make sure that tourniquet's tight so that blood doesn't go into the rest of the body and kill the patient, and then transport as quickly as possible to the hospital. And if it was me, if it was my arm now, this is what I would do, would be to take, I've got the 70% DMSO with aloe vera, and I would just probably coat my whole arm in that, keep the tourniquet on there, and then go to the hospital. And by the time you get there, hopefully the DMSO is bonded with as much of that, those free radicals. And so when the doctors slowly release that tourniquet, minimize the chance of heart attack or cardiac arrest that could be triggered by that, or other potential damage. So that's just kind of a picture of like how it can be used in the short term. Now, extrapolate that out to the long term. So we're under all this EMF, exposure. We have toxins in the environment. Even just stress, like emotional stress, can make you very, very sick when it's very severe. And part of that is, part of what we detox when we go through, if you have a cold or flu, things like that, I believe it's pretty evident by the symptoms that those are detoxification symptoms. When you have runny nose and vomiting and diarrhea and all that stuff, your body's getting rid of stuff. And what I like to look at with DMSO and the potential of it is the ability to kind of do a small amount of that detoxification just throughout the year, just a little bit consistently over time. Little things like that with that compounding effect can have a really big effect, really big result in the long term, without even needing to do, heavy duty therapies. Like I have like a muscle and joint thing that I use, or a lotion that I use that has a little bit of DMSO in it. And when it's diluted properly, when it's used cleanly, everything that I've seen is that it's been safe to use for a long period of time and is starting to show some cumulative like benefits, including me starting to like lower the size of some of these lymphatic bumps when applied topically at stronger dosages. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Okay, time check. Cool. I won't spend too much more time on like the heart tissue. I kind of talked about that with the protecting from the reactive oxygen species, cardiovascular benefits. We talked about that as well as with the small blood vessels in the brain. It also has similar effects on the larger blood vessels, which is like reinforcing the arterial walls and protecting them from damage and stress. DMSO, MSM, and joint health. This is a big one, especially long-term with the chronic acidity of diet can break down cartilage kind of quickly. So it's important to watch that, watch your sugar intake, watch your acidity levels if you're into looking at that. And DMSO basically just has an overall like anti-inflammatory effect, but then that sulfur is used in the upkeep of your joints. So that's a potential long-term benefit of that. Joint tissue maintenance, and it's not just the cartilage. There's the ligaments, there's your ACL, your MCL, in the knees. You've got connective tissue in your hands. One of the long-term effects that I see is the benefit of the flexibility of some of these tissues. So as you increase the oxidation stress on joints, they can get real stiff, and the tissues like the ligaments can actually become hardened. And they've shown through different studies and longer. I mean, I think the longest study they've done is 16 weeks, but in that time frame, they've shown a return to a more soft, mobile tissue, ligaments, tendons, connective tissue, fascia surrounding the muscle, neuron sheaths, and nerve sheaths as well. Neurological resilience. So we've talked a little bit about that. Just lowering inflammation in general. It's like, kind of fundamental at this point. I use, people eat stuff for lower inflammation. Turmeric is amazing for that. Garlic is amazing for that. So this is like another version of that, but used topically. Cardiovascular protection. I will add to this anything. So it's a common trope, but it's anything that's good for the heart is also good for sexual function. So potentially very promising long-term results as far as like protecting sexual function, the health of the blood vessels, as well as other vessels in various body parts. Let's see. Okay, so this is where I want to get into a little bit of the caution real quick. Nothing too big, but they did a study in 2008, but they were applying 90% or higher strength concentrations of DMSO to horses' legs. And they noticed that let me see if it says how long, but it was several weeks and months, I believe. But basically that horse started to have deterioration in the tendon. It was too supple. And a horse is a big animal. It's very heavy. And when they move, there's a lot of strain on those ligaments. And so high strength DMSO on ligaments over a long period of time could potentially weaken them. So that's really important when considering using this for joints and arthritis. And that's probably the biggest risk of people using this by themselves at home without studying it or really looking into it, is the dosage. 70% is the max strength. You want to dilute 70% plus 30%, clean water, distilled water, or aloe vera juice, something like that. So this is just my personal experience. So after 2 years of consistent use, using it both topically for just like I have a skin lotion that I make with it. I use it topically for joints and muscle recovery. Me personally, it's consistently having about like cutting my muscle recovery time in about half. And myself and a few other friends and other athletes have experienced the same things like that, about half the time of that long, like really tight stiffness in the muscles. And that's not just the DMSO, that's a blend of what I put in here. A big part of that is the magnesium, but no ill effects as far as that goes. I'm not super religious about being extremely clean before I put it on. I do make sure that I don't have like any kind of chemicals like grease or oil, like motor oil or anything on my hands when putting it on. But I'm also only using it at about 10% strength in whatever I'm mixing it, in wherever I'm putting it on. What I do use that 70% strength is from Haltrophin, they make a DMSO and aloe. And I put that directly on the skin. There's no real irritation. Sometimes there's a little stinging. I'm sorry, not stinging. There was a little bit when I had that lymphatic bump kind of detox, but nothing alarming. No effects, no ill effects on my tendons or ligaments. Joint stability is good. In fact, sometimes if my knee acts up or feels a little bit wobbly after like a sketchy weightlifting session, I feel like it helps stabilize or reduce the feeling of like it might slip out of joint or something crazy. With tricky things like the shoulder capsule, there's a lot of things going on with that shoulder capsule. And for me, my beginning of it was a shoulder injury, but I've recently learned about the connection with perimenopause with frozen shoulder. And we've had really good success, really good results with one of our products, ALLEVIATE, with releasing that shoulder tension and some of the pain. And I believe a big part of that is the magnesium combined with DMSO. And I'm told by, I think there's one naturopath that I talked to this past weekend at the markets that was saying that for some people, it's like a 2-year thing from, the onset of the frozen shoulder to basically all the fiddling they do with cortisone injections, and some of them even trying to push towards surgery, to the point to where it finally relieves itself or finishes whatever that inflammation, reshaping of the hormones and everything else. So something like DMSO with magnesium could be very effective at shortening the time frame to a resolution for that. All right. Well, this is our resource page. I can leave that up there. You can screenshot it if you want to find us. Our website is there. Instagram and YouTube is kind of our more commonly where I post content. Whenever I do get time to post videos, they'll be up there. And I will be at the Tiny Homes Expo at the My Self Reliance Pavilion doing 3 different presentations. Friday night will be a 90-minute presentation. Beyond first aid, we'll get into some skills and some practical knowledge about the body and how to handle and how to be prepared for different emergencies. And then as well as equipment that you can use for like practical gear and cheap stuff you can make yourself that work really well for emergencies, and natural remedies that I find very useful and great at, answering things that typically would be done with medications that can be sometimes problematic. So I'm interested in using some of these natural remedies to replace pharmaceuticals, helping reduce toxicity in the body, giving people a longer, like just a better experience with their bodies longer, more joint health, more mobility, better brain function, better everything, just performance and access to activities and mobility that is sometimes difficult in older age. Now, do we have time for some questions?
I'll just jump in quickly too. Someone just asked, are we also natural_AF? There's both on YouTube. We also have a podcast, the Natural AF podcast. So you might also see us on YouTube there. So that's kind of an offshoot of Natural ArtForm. And we actually did an episode recently on DMSO as well, among many other topics that we discuss in terms of the realm of natural health and holistic health. Yeah, but Natural ArtForm is where you'll find more of sort of the informational content on like specific to our products. And also I've got them here just to recap. So our product range is, so our flagship product, Alleviate, is a muscle and joint cream. So this is around 3% DMSO. Our Alleviate Pro, which I think you've got over there, that's what we're giving away tonight. So we've just launched this month. And the Pro version has 10% DMSO and a few additions to what's already in Alleviate, which is our proprietary blend of herbal oils and magnesium. And it's the most absorbable form of magnesium through the skin that we use, and some other beautiful, essential oils. And a lot of people comment how lovely it smells, especially compared to a lot of those menthol muscle rubs that don't actually really do anything. And then our advanced skin repair lotion, Regenerate. This also has about 10% DMSO. I don't think Isaac touched on this, but they actually use DMSO in burn clinics in the US. It's amazing for skin regeneration. And again, because of the enhanced absorption qualities, it also helps to deliver all of the good stuff that's in there as well. So COMFREY calendula. This one doesn't have magnesium, but the aloe juice, it will help to deliver that more deeply into the cells as well. And then we have our natural deodorant range. That's just one of them. We have 3 different scents. No DMSO in that. That's purely just for the purposes of BO. There's a little bit of calendula in there that helps with the lymphatic system. But yeah, there are products that actually contain the DMSO, and for very good reason, as Isaac's gone through. So we've got lots of questions in the chat, but I also just wanted to go back to something I think it was Joyce said earlier in the chat, that she has DMSO and is scared to use it. And we actually get that a lot. We've met a lot of people at the markets when we're doing markets that say the same thing because they just have the straight DMSO and they don't know how to use it. So again, just going back to, Isaac mentioned the book by Amanda Vollmer. Highly recommend getting that book if you want something as like something to refer to. And there's like, she has recipes in there and like dilution rates for depending on what you're using it for. But also just a really practical way that you can start using it if you just want to start experimenting. Like Isaac mentioned, a little bit goes a really long way, and more isn't necessarily better. So if you have a natural product at home that you really love, that you want to enhance the effects of, you can start by just putting like a drop or two, depending on how much. Like if it's a full jar, you could probably do a couple of drops. If it's not much in a jar, you can just start by putting a drop or two in that and mixing it in and just using it as like basically the absorption effects. Again, you do have to be really careful with what you're mixing it with, because you want to make sure that whatever product you're mixing the DMSO into doesn't have any synthetic ingredients or potentially harmful ingredients. But again, a lot of the people that we meet at the markets that, are very drawn to our products because they're already into natural health, they have a lot of really beautiful, clean, natural products. And yeah, we actually met someone at the market that said the same thing. I don't know how to use my DMSO. And we suggested that to her and she was like, oh, I'm going to give that a go. So that's a really like practical way that you could start using it.
Just to respond to, so Emma asked about our products helping with leg cramps. DMSO with magnesium is really good for leg cramps. Both forms of the Alleviate have that in there, very quickly releasing the cramps, but also preventing them as well. So DMSO, someone mentioned about DMSO with castor oil. That's a really good thing. In fact, we used DMSO with castor oil after Alexa had a surgery, and honestly, you should probably start that back up again because it really helps with scar repair. Castor oil is really good with that. DMSO is also good with softening scars and helping your body kind of break down the excess collagen that's in the skin and dealing with it naturally and gently. Yeah, DMSO with castor oil is good. Again, max percentage I would add is like 70%, but you don't need that much percent. In Regenerate, the skin cream that Alexa pointed out is 10%, and I've had at that dosage 10% DMSO with aloe vera, take blisters and absorb them back into my skin and completely like knit the skin back together with no blistering or no peeling later. So 10% is still very potent just because it's, less than what a lot of these other, like even Amanda Vollmer's books talks about what you can mix DMSO with. And often she'll put like 70% or 40% is pretty common. And I just make it stretch a little bit further by just adding 10%. Other things you can mix it with. And so basically anything that's got to be, I would say, clean, organic. Anything you put on your skin is going to absorb potentially into your body. DMSO is going to make it go in faster and deeper. So just be aware of that. But if there's something that you feel like would be a good topical thing, I mean, at the right dilution, some essential oils, you just want to be careful with essential oils because they're potent already by themselves on the skin. So you got to be careful with that. And DMSO tends to amplify their effects because of how it gets them into the tissues even deeper. So, I'll just say that, but yeah, it's a really good idea. I think Amanda Vollmer, VOLLMER, I put that in the chat. If you look up her book, Healing with DMSO, she's got some more actual recipes that you can make at home. All right.
Someone just asked to, yeah, the DMSO with castor oil is actually one of my favorite mixes. I've used it for quite a few things. No one in here probably wants to know this, but full disclosure, I have a background in nutrition as well, so you get very used to talking about bodily functions, and I'm like, I'm just share it all. But I actually used it on, I've used the castor oil DMSO mix for hemorrhoids, and I like quite, especially when it's quite painful. And I tried so many different things and nothing worked. And that was the only thing that worked, like literally within 24 hours, like pain completely went away, swelling went down. Yeah, the DMSO castor oil is amazing. Highly recommend using that. Donna also said that Miracle Products at Yandina Sunshine Coast also sell DMSO and MSM. So I haven't heard of them, but that just reminded me, I wanted to say, because yeah, Isaac obviously mentioned we order from Heiltropfen for our products. Just be careful because it's actually the only one of the only things we order outside of Australia. I think it's the only thing we order outside of Australia, right? Is that right?
That and magnesium.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because that comes from like a Tibetan lake or something crazy. So the reason that we looked in Australia, because we try and source all of our products as our ingredients, sorry, as locally as possible, is that a lot of them are packaged in plastic bottles, which is concerning considering how absorptive DMSO is. And Isaac actually had an experience with, you ordered, like it came in a plastic bottle. What happened with that? And it literally dissolved the lid or something.
Yeah, dissolve the little seal on the top, and then they'd wrapped it in like saran wrap and tape, and it basically liquefied the saran wrap. It's not, so I definitely was like not handling that with my bare hands because you don't want liquid saran wrap going into your bloodstream.
Yeah. So I just brought that up to just be careful where you buy it from because yeah, if it's being packaged in plastic and then being shipped from God knows where, yeah, it could potentially get contaminated with plastics and microplastics and things like that because it will absorb anything it comes into contact with. Any more questions? I've loved all the questions.
Yeah,
They're
so
awesome.
it's a really great presentation, you guys, and it's so great to hear about DMSO and get more familiar with it. Um, so can I ask you, do you see this in the future becoming more mainstream, or are you more concerned of it being taken off the shelf, like, you know, out of general use?
Yeah, I mean, I think um, there's a lot of opportunities for them to make more of a problem for people using it than they have. And so I haven't seen a lot more. Like Amanda Vollmer did have her website confiscated by the Canadian government, and then she just set up another website, set up a private membership association, and she's been fined for like, pretty much through the whole COVID mess and all that. So I don't think they've got their sights set on it. I know they're using it for a lot of things medically already. They're using it in burn clinics to some degree. They're using it in sport medicine, particularly in America on the field. I don't know what like strength or dilution they're using, but when an injury happens on the field, often they'll put DMSO on that to limit this, like the extent of the damage. So it is being used in sports physiology is starting to pick it up and use it more. So I see it becoming more mainstream, but it could reach a point where they come back and circle again and do another like, all right, you can use it, but you have to do X, Y, and Z with it. You have to say this about it. But it's pretty widely available, even in Australia as well. Like I said, you can get it on Amazon. So if they wanted to block it, they're not really trying hard to do it.
Right. Okay. So that's good. We're kind of in that safe zone for now, but don't take it for granted.
Right. Yeah. Use responsibly.
Now I'm sure everyone's excited for the draw. So what do we got going, Alexa? We're gonna have a fun.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now, but we'll give it a spin and we'll see who gets it. So, okay, it looks like it runs on there. I'm going to give it a spin. Tamara.
Congratulations.
Tamara, where are you from, Tamara? Tamara, send me your details. I will make sure it gets out to you, and or you can send it to Alexa. That's fine. Lovely. Send me your details. Lovely.
Oh,
And
there we go. Tamara's from Gold Coast. I just scrolled back in the chat to see where she was from. We'll get that jar of Alleviate Pro sent out to you. I don't have it to show it.
now,
Isaac's
for
got it.
anyone in Queensland, we are doing a special Queensland Zoom launch on the 11th of June. So stay tuned for those details coming out. We want to launch our My Self Reliance Hub in Queensland, headed up by the beautiful Erica, who's on tonight. Love you all to come on that if you're in Queensland. And we're going to really expand our hub, getting ready for our Tiny Homes Brisbane edition. So wonderful. Well, thanks for everyone jumping on tonight. Hope you enjoyed that and learnt something new. I certainly did. And thank you, Isaac and Alexa, for that amazing presentation. We really appreciate you guys and can't wait to spend the weekend with you next weekend after next. So wonderful. Do
Looking forward
join
to it.
us. Yeah. Sorry about that. Do join us next Tuesday. It is the 5th Tuesday of the month, and it's usually our hub leaders meeting at training, but we are opening it up to anyone else who wants to jump on. We're opening an open meeting because Dr. Jen Draper is coming on, and she's sharing her wonderful information that she has, but she's got a lot of host of different modalities to share. She's off in Bali at the moment learning a new modality called MAPS, Make Anything Possible. And so she's going to share with us all about that. So health, relationships, money, it's all there next Tuesday night. So we'll see you back on. Same link, hopefully, if you register tonight, it should be the same link every Tuesday night. So easy to get in.
Thanks, Kelli. Did a great job. Appreciate inviting me on. Thank you, everybody, for your attention.
And go back and watch the podcast that Isaac and Alexa and I did a few weeks ago. And all of their podcasts, they're amazing. But yeah, thank you for allowing me on your podcast, guys. That was super fun as well.
Yeah,
Thank you. It's always such a pleasure.
Cool. Well, see you guys all next week.
Thank you. Bye.